you and for your kind words. So just for a fraction of a second, I'm going to go off video because I just want to introduce Dr. Sameer. Welcome, Dr. Sameer. It's a great pleasure to have you for today's presentation. Now, Dr. Sameer Mehrotra is an interventional cardiologist and a heart rhythm specialist who has more than 15 years of experience in the field of cardiology. He has done his DM in cardiology from All India Institute of Medical Sciences and has done his MD medicine from BHU in Banaras. He is an International Board of Heart Rhythm Examiners certified cardiac device specialist and has worked in prestigious multi-specialty hospitals like Vedanta, JP Hospital, Max Super Specialty Hospital as a consultant as well as a senior consultant in cardiology. He's skilled in doing all the procedures possible. So whether it's angiography or doing complex angioplasties, he's a certified cardiac device specialist. So pacemaker implantations, ICDs, pacemaker reimplantations are all very much up his alley. Electrophysiological studies as well as radiofrequency ablation for heart rhythms, for aberrant heart rhythms, again is something that is his forte. Today's topic, which Dr. Chauhan has already told us, is basically on atrial fibrillation and acute coronary syndrome, which remain two of the most important indications for antithrombotic therapy. So over to you, Dr. Sameer Mehrotra, and we looking forward to an excellent presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Anupama. Thank you for the kind introduction, kind words, and thank you, Dr. Chauhan sir, and the whole Physician Forum of India, all the participants. And it's indeed great pleasure to attend the talk today and I'll try to discuss something which is day-to-day practice and which we see most of the time. And so I need somebody to please allow me to share the screen. Yeah.
You will have to speak to Vardhan, I think. He's there. I'm sure he must be around.
So just let me see.
Mr. Vardhan, are you there?
I'll call him, sir.
Yes. I think he
yes. Vardhan is getting it sorted, sir. In the meantime, basically, I call myself a plumber and an electrician. I just go on cleaning the pipes as well as I modify the circuits. That is my job as a cardiologist. And today, actually, we were talking about NOACs, PCI, and atrial fibrillation. So if you look at the overall, I think, is it okay if I start giving some background till the time they start having the slide share? Is it okay, sir?
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Right, sir. So basically, if you look at it, the overall scenario, NOACs have come in the market in the last 7 to 8 years, I will say. And definitely they have gained preponderance over the vitamin K antagonist. And because of they being safe, they can be given in renal dysfunction patients. And I think the most important thing about NOACs is that these drugs don't need any monitoring. So everybody is very comfortable in giving NOACs. The reason being that we are quite scared of the bleeding and maintaining the INR in patients who are in atrial fibrillation. Every week of 20 days or 12 days, just a minute, so Vardhan. Yeah, Vardhan. Okay, done. Thank you. Just a minute. I think just it's some technical issue. Vardhan has.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Online.
Yeah, Vardhan. So I think the slides are visible now. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, yes. They are visible.
So fine. So we are talking about refining antithrombotic therapy for atrial fibrillation and acute coronary syndromes of PCI. So as I had already told you, the problem here is that we have on one end atrial fibrillation, on the other hand we have acute coronary syndrome. One side requires anticoagulation, the other side requires antiplatelets. If you combine all of them, what happens is increased bleeding. If you give one, there might be a possibility you might have complication either in the terms of ischemic stroke or you might have some ischemic events in the heart like stent thrombosis. So to start with, what exactly we know about all the three entities? First, dual antiplatelets reduce the ischemic events post-angioplasty. Ticagrelor and prasugrel are stronger antiplatelets than clopidogrel. Clopidogrel resistance is an issue, and that was the reason why we started shifting from clopidogrel to prasugrel and ticagrelor. NOACs are superior to vitamin K antagonists both in terms of bleeding as well as prevention of ischemic episodes in patients with atrial fibrillation. The second advantage with NOACs is that we don't require any monitoring in these patients, and the third advantage is that the dietary restrictions which were usually associated with vitamin K antagonists, they are not associated with NOACs. The fifth thing is that it's a new thing. Actually, the center there in cardiology, aspirin, is becoming weaker and weaker with each passing day based on the recent data. So I still remember since when I was doing MBBS, and I think that all of you, most of you, must be remembering during your MBBS. Patient. But after 25-30 years now in of ischemic heart disease or cardiac patients. If you look at AF and CAD, both are overlapping populations. You merit 7 to 10% of the patients who present to you for PCI, whether acute coronary event or there is a chronic CAD, these patients have it. And overall, 25 to 30 patients of the patients who are having AF might require PCI for some ischemic heart disease in future. Now, what is challenging is patients with ACS. They can present as ACS, PCI, stent or CABG, the treatment option. We have the options of aspirin, clopidogrel, newer P2Y12 inhibitors or NOACs. That is a query. The variant way factors are the doses of these blood thinners, what is the type of stent, the duration of blood thinners, the risk of bleeding, what are the subgroups, what is the genetics, and what are the costs. If you look at atrial fibrillation, we have vitamin K antagonists, we have NOACs, and we have antiplatelets in patients who are having a very low risk of stroke. Then we have to think about the risk of body or chronic kidney disease. How do you monitor these drugs? Is there any reversal agent which is available for these drugs or not? And the last but not the least is the cost of these therapies. Now what we are going to talk about today is this overlapping segment. Patients who have atrial fibrillation as well as coronary artery disease. And it is only in this segment that we are worried about whether...
Slides are not moving.
No, I haven't moved the slides, sir.
Okay.
I haven't moved.
Sorry.
So it is only in this segment of the patient that we are going to talk about. It's very clear what to do in patients with isolated CAD or isolated AF. But when a patient has CAD, AF and he has to undergo stent, then that is where our decision making comes. So this slide just shows the various trials which have established these drugs. Dabigatran based on Reliance trial, rivaroxaban on Rocket-AF trial, apixaban on Aristotle trial, and edoxaban on Engage-AF-PIMI trial. So all these trials were done in patients with atrial fibrillation, not in patients with atrial fibrillation and acute coronary syndrome.
Dr. Samir, we only have the opening.
Yes, sir.
We only have the opening slide in front of us, which says about, yeah. Now it's moving.
It's moving now, sir? It's moving?
It's moving. Yeah, it's moved now. It's moved now. Yes.
Right, sir. So we have to think about, these are the four drugs which came as NOACs: dabigatran, rivaroxaban, apixaban and edoxaban, which were established on the basis of these clinical trials in patients with atrial fibrillation. There were direct comparisons with vitamin K antagonists, and these drugs led to non-inferiority with decreased bleeding risk. And that is why they become the drug of first choice for patients with atrial fibrillation. Now you have to remember one thing, why I put this slide is that you have to think about here the doses. Dabigatran 150 or 110 milligram twice daily, 20 milligram rivaroxaban once daily, apixaban 5 milligram twice daily, and edoxaban 60 milligram or 30 milligram once daily. These doses are important. You have to remember that, because once I will be discussing these trials of AF and PCI, then this is an important consideration which we have to look at. These are the three drugs that we know what are used as antiplatelets: clopidogrel, prasugrel, ticagrelor. The doses are: maintenance dose of clopidogrel is 75, prasugrel is 10, and ticagrelor is 90 milligram twice a day. Prasugrel and ticagrelor are stronger antiplatelets compared to ticagrelor. Clopidogrel and prasugrel are irreversible, while ticagrelor is reversible. The third thing is that patients many times have clopidogrel resistance, but as such, as ticagrelor and ticagrelor resistance has not been noticed. So with this background, we come about NOAC in AF plus ACS. What is the evidence for NOACs in AF and ACS? If you look in the last 5 years, we had 5 or 6 trials that came, and starting from 2016, there was a Pioneer AF PCI trial in rivaroxaban. Then came a trial with dabigatran, that was Redual PCI. Then came most recent trial was Augustus ACS. It was a 2x2 factorial design trial with apixaban. And then you had Entrust AF PCI trial with edoxaban. Based on these 4 trials, there were 2 more trials which I will be discussing. And these trials, they checked the efficacy of this antiplatelet as well as NOAC in patients who were undergoing PCI. They were comparing dual therapy versus triple therapy. One important thing which I am stressing, and I will stress again and again, none of these trials were powered for efficacy in reducing the ischemic events. All they were assessing was the endpoint was bleeding, decrease in bleeding. None of these trials were assessing for the ischemic events for stent thrombosis. They were not powered to detect that. So the first trial which started this discussion was West trial. The study design was patients with indication for oral anticoagulant after PCI. Once the stent has been placed, they had a triple therapy: clopidogrel plus oral anticoagulant plus aspirin, or no aspirin, dual therapy. The primary outcome measure was combination of STIMI and gastro major and minor bleed, and secondary outcome was major adverse cardiac event. In this trial, it was established that patients who were put on clopidogrel plus oral anticoagulants plus aspirin had a higher incidence of bleeding, and the complete bleeding rate was significantly more when compared to when aspirin was reduced. It was a very small trial, only 500 patients, and it was not adequately powered, but it paved way for the further trials to evaluate whether we can omit aspirin from this therapy with antiplatelets and anticoagulants in patients with AF and PCI. Then came the Pioneer AF PCI study. It was an open-label, randomized, multi-center study. It took patients with paroxysmal, persistent or permanent AF who underwent PCI with stent placement. And it divided the patients into 3 groups, 2100 patients. The first group, they said, was 2.5 milligram twice a day, rivaroxaban plus dual antiplatelet. The second group was dual antiplatelet along with it 15 milligram of rivaroxaban plus clopidogrel. And the third was vitamin K antagonist plus low dose aspirin. So you have to see, they had checked 2.5 milligram twice a day dose also, but this dose, remember this thing that this is not recommended for the prevention of atrial fibrillation related ischemic events. The only recommended dose is 20 milligram. They had used the lower doses, 15 milligram or 2.5 milligram twice a day plus clopidogrel or plus aspirin. It was an open-label randomized multi-center study, and indication was clear that AF with ACS patients. I will be discussing in detail the results of these trials, but most important thing was that in this trial also they realized that the patients were having a reduced risk of bleeding when they were given dual antiplatelet treatment. And the minimum risk was with dual with rivaroxaban 15 milligram plus clopidogrel. Even with the moment they started giving aspirin with the other two drugs, the patient had increased incidence of bleeding. So that is why they realized that aspirin should be omitted in these patients who are having PCI or AF, although the trial was not powered to see whether there is a benefit in terms of ischemic events or not. But based only on the bleeding data, they said that this dose should be recommended. And there is no data to suggest that 2.5 milligram twice a day rivaroxaban will help to reduce the AF episode related ischemia. Then came the residual PCI. This was PCI with paroxysmal or persistent AF or permanent non-valvular AF. Again, 2,500 patients, 1:1:1 ratio. The first group was dabigatran, twice daily 110 milligram plus clopidogrel or ticagrelor. In fact, this was the only trial in which they used ticagrelor as far as I remember. The second group was dabigatran 150 milligram twice daily plus clopidogrel or ticagrelor. The third group was warfarin plus clopidogrel or ticagrelor plus aspirin. You have to see that they didn't use aspirin with NOACs. And the randomization phase was less than 120 hours post-PCI, or less than 72 hours was preferable. Now remember this thing, if less than 120 hours post-PCI means that for the first 4 or 5 days, or in the immediate post or procedural period, these patients had been given aspirin. As you all know, the risk of stent thrombosis is varies temporally, being highest in the first 48 to 72 hours or 1 week. And during that period, these patients were already given aspirin as well as another antiplatelet. It was only after 72 to 120 hours that these patients were randomized. And even in the warfarin data, 50% of the patients were having an adequate INR, otherwise most of the patients were either having less INR or more INR. Again, the primary outcome measure was trying to first bleed or bleeding event. Secondary endpoints were composite of all-cause death or thrombotic events, which included MI, stroke, and unplanned revascularization. The follow-up was at 1 month. So this was the second trial in which they checked for dabigatran. Again, what they realized was dabigatran plus clopidogrel, 110 milligram, was associated with minimal bleeding, warfarin plus clopidogrel or ticagrelor plus aspirin, maximum bleeding. Dabigatran with clopidogrel 150 milligram was associated with moderate risk of bleeding. So definitely warfarin is out, that thing is very clear. Now the only thing which we have to decide is which NOAC and which blood thinner. The third trial which was done was Augustus trial. It was a very robust trial which randomized 4,600 patients. It was a 2x2 factorial design. So patients were given aspirin for all on the day of ACS or PCI. And then aspirin apixaban 5 milligram BD was given to this patient. After this, the patients were randomized and double-blinded to receive either placebo or aspirin. While on the other hand, they gave vitamin K antagonist to other set of patients, and then they were randomized to aspirin or placebo. All the patients were given clopidogrel, whether in the aspirin group, apixaban group, or vitamin K, or this aspirin group. Inclusion were AF, physician decision, and ACS or PCI plant 2 inhibitor more than 6 months. So one important thing is that patients who were randomized, they were randomized up to 1 week after going the procedure of PCI. So again in this trial, these patients had already received antiplatelets for up till 1 week. That means dual antiplatelet has already been given to these patients. Now the surprising thing that they found out in this trial was that although the risk of bleeding was less, the least bleeding happened with apixaban, placebo, and clopidogrel. But compared to aspirin, patients who were put on placebo had a significantly higher risk of stent thrombosis. Also, because of the sample size of the patient, the trial was not designed to assess these events. They did not reach a statistical significance, but definitely placebo group had a related to aspirin group had a significantly increased risk of stent thrombosis as well as ischemic episode. So that is one thing which is noticeable, and so aspirin as such cannot be ignored even after these robust trials. The last trial which came was Entrust AF PCI. It evaluated 1500 AF patients, but this induced edoxaban. And again, the patients are randomized within 4 hours to 5 days after shape removal, with edoxaban plus their clopidogrel without aspirin or vitamin K with P2Y inhibitor plus aspirin. In this trial, what they realized was that the incidence of bleeding was not different in these two groups. And the ischemic events, again, they realized that they were more or less the same. But again, I would like to stress that even this trial, the trial was not designed to assess the ischemic event. So if I look at all these trials, this is a summary slide. You can see pioneer AF PSI was rivaroxaban, radial PCI was dabigatran, 2 doses. Here it was 2 doses, 2.5 twice a day or 50 milligram. Here it was dabigatran, 1. Edoxaban 50 milligram. Now you have to understand this thing that except for this trial, clopidogrel was used in 90% of the patients, 95% of the patients, 93% of the patients, and 92% of the patients. So in all the trials, less than 10% of the patients were put on the other blood thinners, that is ticagrelor or prasugrel. That is something which is very important. That means that mostly these trials are saying that if you have to use the antiplatelet with OAT, it should be clopidogrel by default. And the second thing which is important is that their randomization was less than 3 days, less than 5 days, less than 5 days, and less than 14 days. So the initial 1 to 5 to 7 days or 10 days, these patients had already been given aspirin and another blood antiplatelet agent. So if you look at again I am going to say, when we put a stent, the maximum risk of stent thrombosis occurs within the first or 24 hours of first week. And most of the patients had already received the aspirin for that duration in all these trials. This is a summary of primary bleeding endpoints for major trials evaluating double versus triple therapy. You can see therapy. Definitely with double therapy, even with vitamin K antagonist, the bleeding risk is low. But when you compare it with oral anticoagulants, then definitely the oral anticoagulants score over the other vitamin K antagonists when you for decreasing the bleeding risk. If you look at the Augustus trial, triple therapy with apixaban, maximum risk; double therapy with apixaban, minimum risk. Similarly here in Pioneer trial also, you can see double therapy with rivaroxaban, the lower dose. So after all these trials and all these data, I still have few unanswered questions. And I am going to talk about that. So the first unanswered question is the highest period for coronary ischemic event is in the days and weeks after the index event. And patients were not enrolled in these trials until a mean of 1 week and up to 2 weeks after the index event of PCI, period during which patients were already receiving aspirin. The second thing is that clopidogrel was the most commonly used P2Y12 inhibitor. And the third thing, uncertainty regarding its response variability and efficacy, particularly without aspirin, can be very concerning, because giving a single antiplatelet like aspirin in a non-responder or a low responder can increase the risk of stent thrombosis. The safety of combining ticagrelor or prasugrel with oral anticoagulants is still uncertain. Less than 10% of the patients in all the trials were on all these higher, more potent antiplatelet drugs. None of the trials were adequately powered to detect significant change in ischemic events. We need at least 14,000 patients to provide an adequate power for the assessment of ischemic outcomes. And in Augustus, the risk of stent thrombosis and coronary thrombotic events were higher in the placebo group. Elimination of aspirin from triple therapy could be associated with a 25% increase in the risk of stent thrombosis. But as such, no trial had the power to assess this outcome. And efficacy of rivaroxaban 2.5 milligram for AF prevention is not known. Now, after all these trials and all these questions, now how do I decide that what should I do for my patient? Well, we have the answer. There are few subsets which have been told by the various guidelines recommending European as well as American guidelines who are unfavorable for triple therapy. A patient with short life expectancy, malignancy, poor expected adherence, poor mental status, end-stage renal disease, advanced stage, prior major bleeding or hemorrhagic stroke, chronic alcohol abuse, anemia, or clinically significant bleeding on dual antithrombotic therapy. These are the patients in which whom you should not think about giving a triple therapy to your patients. You should try to shorten the duration of triple therapy or avoid triple therapy because they are high risk candidates for bleeding. On the other hand, you have patients who have a high risk for ischemia, patients who had a prior stent thrombosis on adequate antiplatelet therapy, stenting of the last remaining patent coronary artery, so that stent is very important for survival of the patient. Diffuse multivessel disease, especially diabetic patients with the vessel size is small and you use stents of the size of 2.5 and longer stents are used. Patients with CKD, patients who have at least 3 stents implanted, that is multivessel angioplasty, more than 3 lesions are treated. Bifurcation is stenting if you are using 2 stents. If the total length of the stented segment is more than 60 millimeter, CTO treatment for a patient who has ST of ST segment elevation MI of the left main artery or the proximal ADT. So here the risk of ischemia is so more that you cannot go for a double therapy, you have to opt for a triple therapy. This is one slide which shows about the Has blood and CHADS2 VASc score, which has been talked off and on in all these trials. CHADS2 VASc score is a score 0 recommends no antithrombotic therapy. Score 1 recommends antithrombotic therapy with oral anticoagulant or antiplatelet therapy. More than 2, you need oral anticoagulation. Now this is important, 0 and 1. If you see a patient who is having atrial fibrillation and his CHADS2 VASc score is 0 or 1, you can skip oral anticoagulation. Has blood, a patient who has a Has blood score of more than 3 indicates that caution is needed when prescribing oral anticoagulation and regular patient review is recommended. So in such patients who have a high Has blood score, you can think about avoiding the oral anticoagulants, or you can go on a dual therapy rather than a triple therapy. These are the points which are covered in CHADS2 VASc score. C is for congestive heart failure, H is for hypertension, A2 is age more than 75 years, D is for diabetes mellitus, stroke, S2 is stroke or transient ischemic attack or thromboembolism, V is vascular, V is vascular disease, age is 65 to 74. More than 75 has 2 points, 65 to 74 has 1 point, and then the sex category, that is male or female. Female sex gets 1 more point, additional point. So out of 9 you have to see what is the score. Has blood score is H is hypertension, abnormal renal and renal function is A, stroke is F, blood is bleeding tendency predisposition, INR, if the patient is on warfarin, L is the labile INR, elderly more than 65 years of age, and drug or alcohol 1.8. So both are 9, the total score is 9. If the Has blood score is more than 3, the chances of bleeding are high. If the CHADS2 VASc is more than 1, the chances of clot formation are high. So if you look at this latest 2021 EHRA practical guide, here is the elective PCI with newer generation drug or ACS with PCI. PCI day 1 to 7, you give a triple therapy, NOAC plus aspirin plus clopidogrel. It can be extended up till 1 month. And here the patient with ACS with PCI and there is a higher risk of stent thrombosis, you can extend it up to 3 months. As you factors which shorten the combination therapy, high bleeding risk, left lower thromboembolic risk, and factors which tend to lengthen the combination therapy are first generation regulatory stent, higher thromboembolic source, or low bleeding. So as you assess that the patient is having a low risk of stent thrombosis or ischemic events, you shorten the duration of antiplatelet, the risk of the triple therapy duration. But if you find that the risk of ischemic events is higher, you can extend that triple therapy for 1 month or up to 3 months. One thing is very clear, that after 1 year you are going to be on monotherapy with a NOAC in patients with PCI and AS. 6 months to 1 year, clopidogrel plus NOAC usually. 3 months to 1 year actually, clopidogrel plus NOAC. And 1 to 3 months, up till 1 month, they say the European Heart Rhythm says that you should give triple therapy with aspirin, NOAC and clopidogrel. 1 to 3 months is variable. After 3 months, you can shift to dual therapy with NOAC plus clopidogrel or aspirin, usually clopidogrel. On the other hand, if I look at the 2021 North American consensus, what they say is that only during peri-PCI it should be triple therapy. After that, they usually shift to double therapy as a default strategy with oral anticoagulant plus FLT-Y inhibitor, which usually is clopidogrel. That is important. Ticagrelor may be considered in patients who have a very high thrombotic risk. Prasugrel is to be avoided in both the guidelines. Patients at high ischemic risk, you can extend the triple therapy up to 1 month. Patients at a low ischemic risk, only for peri-PCI. So basically the difference between the North American and European guidelines is that North European is slightly more conservative, want to continue triple therapy for at least 1 month. While the North Americans say that you can shift to default strategy of dual therapy even after PC. So with this, I think the take-home message will be that for any patient who comes to you who is having atrial fibrillation as well as has undergone a PCI, for every patient you have to assess the risk of bleeding as well as the risk of ischemic event. And the third thing is you have to assess the risk of stroke as a result of AF in these patients. Remember that stroke happens because of clot formation. Clot delay we have to use anticoagulation, while ischemic thrombosis occurs because of platelet activation, for which we have to use anticoagulation. So the ultimate thing has to be a balance between the antiplatelets and anticoagulants, depending upon the risk of bleeding, depending upon the risk of ischemic event, and depending upon the risk of stroke. So at the end of the day, it will be based upon individual clinical decision making as to what is to be done in individual patients. With that, I would like to conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mehrotra, for a very enlightening talk on a practical guide to the use of novel oral anticoagulants. We can now open the house for any questions. Is there any questions that anybody wants to ask Dr. Mehrotra? Please go ahead. So I'd like to ask
Dr. Anupama, with your permission.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
No, please go ahead and ask. No.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask Dr. Mehrotra, what about AF due to valvular lesion? Would you still prefer using novel oral anticoagulants in valvular AF?
See, except for patients who are having severe mitral stenosis and patients who are being given prosthetic heart valves, these drugs have been approved in all the patients, whether they are valvular or non-valvular. Right. So if the patient is having severe mitral stenosis, still the vitamin K antagonists are preferred. But if you find that the patient lives in an area where the monitoring is very difficult, then they are going in for these NOACs.
Is there a particular NOAC that you would prefer over others?
See, if I tell you, all the three NOACs have advantages and disadvantages. If you ask me, I have seen that Apixaban has minimum drug interaction, minimum food interaction, and it can be, those can also be modified in patients with renal dysfunction as well as liver dysfunction. Rivaroxaban, people prescribe Rivaroxaban, but they forget that Rivaroxaban absorption is impacted by food intake. So whenever you are prescribing Rivaroxaban, if you don't take it in between your meal, that is very specific, in between your meal, the absorption reduces from 80 to 50, less than 50%. So that is something which is very important. With Dabigatran, yeah, you have to give it with food. And with Dabigatran,
specifically tell them to have it with a large meal.
Yeah.
That's the only way it gets absorbed.
With a large and yeah, maximum GI we have seen, we discussed with the gastroenterologist also that many times patients are on Dabigatran that come with GI bleed. The second thing is that in AF patients, you are giving them drugs like Verapamil and Amadron. If you read about the interaction of Dabigatran with Verapamil and Amadron, you will realize that they modify the level of each other. Many times you have to reduce the doses of Dabigatran in patients who are in AF and Cotron, so you have to be very careful. So if you ask me, my personal choice will be Apixaban. Adoxaban we have still not tried, but it is not in the market at all.
Right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Dr. Chauhan?
Yeah. Dr. Anupama, I want to ask some questions to Dr. Samir. A wonderful presentation. We recently dealt with a very, very sad wave of COVID in which we lost some of our near and dear ones. And I think most of us were overworked. And
so your voice is not audible, sir. I'm sorry.
Thanks.
So your voice was not audible. So can you repeat the question?
Is it audible now?
Yes, sir, it is audible.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
What I want to say is, so we had a very terrible, fourth wave of COVID in Delhi, in which some of us lost our near and dear ones, and most of us were overworked. I mean, we were working right from 6 a.m. in the morning till 12 p.m. in the night, and still there were calls coming. We had to.
Sir.
Dr. Sandar already on, and they had proven COVID and very high scores, and we were, supposed to be treating them at home. Now, we knew that these patients are the ones who are very high candidates from quality events. So apart from receiving dual antipic aspirin and ticagrelor, once you put them on doses of apixaban 2.5 milligram twice daily, or rivaroxaban 15 milligram or 10 milligram once daily, what are the chances and what is your recommendation for these patients? What are the targets that we should achieve, and what are the red flag signs that we should be looking for?
Disconnected.
So, sir, actually, if you look at it, with the newer generation stents that we are using these days, the trials have been coming that even after 1 month you can switch to single antiplatelet. So once a patient has ACAS, PCI, he is on dual antiplatelets and develops COVID, and his D-dimer is high and you want to start him on oral anticoagulant, then I think the first thing you should do is omit aspirin. The second thing you should do is that if the PCI has been done within the last 1 year, then you can give clopidogrel, and along with it you have to add a blood thinner. Now one thing I would like to emphasize here, that if I have seen that people write apixaban 2.5 milligram twice a day, considering that it is a safe drug and it can be used safely in these patients without the risk of bleeding. But you have to remember there are only 3 indications of using apixaban 2.5 milligram twice a day. Only in 3 scenarios, and 2 out of 3 must be met when you are reducing the dose. One is, as far as I remember, age more than 75 years. Third is renal dysfunction with creatinine clearance less than, I think, 30 or 60. And the third thing is the body.
Creatinine clearance less than 15 ml.
15 or 30, or I don't remember exactly.
15. If it's more
15.
than 15, you can use it.
You can use it. The third thing is that the weight of the patient. If patient is a low body weight patient, then you have to reduce the dose. You have to have 2 out of these 3 criteria if you really want to reduce the dose. So people who are giving 2.5 milligram of apixaban or rivaroxaban 2.5 milligram twice a day, I don't know whether these drugs are recommended or they are going to do their job or not. So in case of PCI patients post-COVID in which you are trying to think about NOACs, if a patient is more than 6 months to 1 year PCI, you can only continue them on NOACs. If the patient is less than 1 year or 6 months post PCI, then you can think about NOAC plus clopidogrel.
Thank you to Dr. Samir for answering that question. My next question is, sir, you said that clopidogrel and prasugrel, they are irreversible P2Y12 inhibitors, but
ticagrelor is a reversible one.
Ticagrelor is a reversible. Sir, in my own personal experience, I find that when we are using ticagrelor as a dual antiplatelet in association with aspirin, this is my personal experience. It may not be the thought of everybody else on the forum. The chances of hemorrhagic episodes are more, whether they are GI episodes, bleeding episodes as epistaxis, or as hemorrhagic CVA. What is your personal experience, sir, of using ticagrelor along with aspirin and the chances of bleeding?
I'll tell you very honestly, sir. Ticagrelor, I always had few concerns the moment it was launched. Especially, see, you have to look at the patient profile that you are treating. Ticagrelor has to be given twice a day. The thing that it's a reversible inhibitor is an advantage if you want to go for surgery in these patients. That is why they promoted it. But this can also turn to be a disadvantage because it's a reversible inhibitor. Sometimes the patient misses their single dose. And what happens, it was a costly drug. We have seen patients who used to come and say कि डॉक्टर साहब दिन में 2 बार तो महंगा पड़ रहा था, हमने एक ही बार खाना शुरू कर दिया. So these are the practical problems that we face with Ticagrelor. The third thing is that breathlessness is an underestimated thing with Ticagrelor. It is there, and it's quite a significant chunk of population comes to your breathlessness. Fourth thing is that many times patients who are with heart failure and they have been given Ticagrelor after MI, they are also started on beta blocker. You will find that they go into heart blocks. Ticagrelor can also worsen the rhythm disorders. Always remember these three things are very important. Besides concerning the bleeding part, I'll be very honest, my experience with Ticagrelor is very limited because it's the last 7 to 8 years. I have been using exclusively Prasugrel in my patients, at least for the first year. And trust me, except for 1 or 2 episodes, I haven't seen any bleeding occurring with Prasugrel and aspirin 75 mg. But definitely with Brilinta, as we discuss individually, sometimes I notice that people are discussing about stent thrombosis. Patient was already on Ticagrelor, or patients are discussing about GI bleed. So definitely it seems that the bleeding episodes are more with Ticagrelor, although as such there has not been any trial comparing Ticagrelor and Prasugrel in terms of bleeding GI bleed.
Sir, you mentioned about certain trials which were done abroad, and now we see Ticagrelor being increasingly used in India. I want
Sir, actually Ticagrelor,
as eminent cardiologists, are there any India-specific trials on Ticagrelor?
Sir, when Ticagrelor was established way back in 2000, I think 11 or 12, then at that time the market was flooded with data. After that, there have been some small studies. I am not very much aware whether there have been any clear-cut long sample size studies with Ticagrelor and Prasugrel or not. But definitely, Ticagrelor has been used extensively in the market. It is also a very costly drug, and Prasugrel was basically sidelined on the pretext that Ticagrelor is a drug which is a reversible drug and it causes less incidence of bleeding. But the real data doesn't fit into that. It was promoted as a reversible drug, so the bleeding risk will be less, and that's why people were given Ticagrelor, and that's why people started giving Ticagrelor without going into the depth of the trials.
Sir, you mentioned you mentioned about the dose of Ticagrelor as being 90 milligrams twice a day. I want to draw your attention now to the fact that there is a dose of Ticagrelor
60 milligrams twice a day. So one thing you have to remember, that Ticagrelor 60 milligrams twice a day
after 1 year to be given twice a day, especially in people with diabetes, and increased vulnerability to episodes of coagulation and stent thrombosis with multiple. I want to know your opinion. I want to know your opinion about that.
Sir, see, the first thing is, what is the aim of giving antiplatelets in the first year or first month or first 6 months versus what is the aim of giving antiplatelets after that? In the initial year, the most important thing that we are worried about is stent thrombosis or restenosis. So we focus on giving a higher dose or double antiplatelet agent for the first 6 months at least. The data says that we can even give it only up till 3 months with the new generation stent. But that is something which we are worried about. First is stent thrombosis, second is stent restenosis. While after 1 year, you are not, because the stent has endothelitis, you are not worried about stent thrombosis or restenosis. We are worried about those plaques which are already there and which might rupture, or the native disease might progress in these patients. So that is why you don't need that high dose of ticagrelor. You can even manage with low dose of ticagrelor, 60 milligram. I think rather than giving a costly drug like ticagrelor 60 milligram twice a day, you can even come to a combination of aspirin and clopidogrel 75 milligram each in your patient. Usually what happens, we shift our patients after 1 year to any of the gold combinations, whether Rosuva's gold or Rose or aspirin equistrin gold, which contains statin with aspirin and clopidogrel 75 milligram. And that's it. You don't need to, I don't think that if the patient is taking proper diet and lifestyle management and patient is taking 220 fluid,
Dr. Sameer, my last
you will
question.
have a significantly. And secondly, sir, one more thing, sir. Nowadays, the trials have also come up that in patients who are having chronic stable angina, you should start giving them rivaroxaban 2.5 milligram twice a day. So that has also come up that rivaroxaban along a patient with chronic stable angina, and if they are also having peripheral arterial disease, you give them rivaroxaban 2.5 mg twice a day. So I don't know where we are heading towards, but I am quite skeptical in just following these trials which are coming every other month and blindly following their practices. I think we should give it some more time before we change our practices.
Sir, my last question is something which we sometimes find in our clinical practice. A patient who has undergone PCI on account of ACS and is on dual antiplatelet and develops a LV thrombus, and now we need to anticoagulate this patient for a long term. Sir, what is your preferred anticoagulant in this case, and what are the red flag signs that we should be looking for while following up this patient? The duration of anticoagulation.
So the first and the foremost thing is, when was the PCI done? If it was done immediately and you see the patient came to you with acute myocardial infarction and T-level myocardial infarction, you did a PCI. Because of the akinetic area, there is a large thrombus in the LV. So then you know that you don't have any options, you have to give this patient blood thinners. What usually I do, I usually keep the patient on aspirin, clopidogrel, and along with it, I give them Clexane for 1 week. Low molecular weight heparin for 1 week. If I have to shift at all the patient to NOAC, then after 1 week we can stop aspirin. We can keep on giving clopidogrel to the patient and we can add a NOAC. Whichever you feel like, whichever you are comfortable with. The NOAC has to be given for a period of 3 to 6 months in these cases. And as the duration progresses, usually these clots, what we have seen, they either get organized with the wall of the left ventricle or these clots get dissolved. And in such cases, you can very well stop the anticoagulation, because once the clot has organized, after 6 months, the chances of embolization on the clot are very less likely. And the reason for clot formation was that acute event, and there is no factor as such which can lead to a reformation of a clot. So definitely after 6 months, you can stop the anticoagulation. Aspirin I would like to give for 1 week, because even in these trials, we have seen that aspirin was given for 1 week, so I will not. I will discuss one case. There was a patient post-COVID, that patient developed liver abscess, then patient developed atrial flutter. With LV dysfunction, patient is presently admitted under PSRI. So last week the patient came, we could not give her anticoagulation because the liver parameters were derailed. And it was a flutter. So we thought that might be we can be slightly more lenient. So yesterday the patient, day before yesterday the patient came, we said okay, we will cardiovert the flutter. We admitted the patient, gave the patient a metronome, and because the liver functions had stabilized. And the next day morning, before doing the cardioversion, we said we'll check that. And there was a huge clot in the LV. It was a soft clot which was formed within a week. So now what to do? Now what we have done is that, in that case, we have started giving Clexane to that patient in the hospital. There has been some softening of the clot. And what we have decided is that after 2 to 3 days or 4 days, we will discharge the patient on oral anticoagulant. And that will be going to be our strategy, at least for the next 3 months, 1 to 3 months, that we are going to give him oral anticoagulant. But remember this thing, the clot that was formed in an acute MI setting was because of a reason. Once the acute MI is resolved, the clot is resolved, the chances of recurrence of that clot are very less likely, unless the LV dysfunction is so severe.
Dr. Samir sir, you mentioned about some of the guidelines for AF, and you mentioned about the CHAT-WAC score, and you mentioned about the health blood score. Sir, can I ask you very, very simple questions for our physicians and the general physicians who are in practice? Sir, every patient of AF more than 75 years of age, he needs to be on a novel oral anticoagulant. What's your guideline, sir?
See, if you have a patient of atrial fibrillation, usually they will have either hypertension, diabetes, or CKD. So that themselves makes them a high risk candidate for stroke. And although the Hals blood score might be high, but in patients with atrial fibrillation and the newer oral anticoagulants, the data has been established that even in elderly, NOACs are safer in terms of increasing they are at least non-inferior to vitamin C antagonists for the bleeding risk. So any day if you have to, then you should start the oral anticoagulants in such case.
Sir, some of the novel oral anticoagulants, we have their antidote now. Like for dabigatran, we have an antidote, although which is very costly, and I think it is now available.
Dabigatran के लिए antidote is available, and the company is providing it many times free of cost. They have a scheme that if you keep any patient on dabigatran and that patient develops a bleed, they will provide the antidote free of cost. But you have to remember one thing, that even with an antidote, the mortality is more than 70%. Once there is an intracranial bleed, you can't do anything much.
Sir, I want to compliment you for a wonderful webinar, for your wonderful deliberation, for your wonderful insight into NOAC on these two specific topics on HCS. I want to revert back to Dr. Anupama, our moderator for the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. So if there are no further questions, is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? Go ahead, sir. Please go ahead, Dr. Nag.
Yeah, I just wanted
I can get
this is slightly off the topic, but severely hypertensive with having an episode of TIA, what would be your choice of anticoagulant?
Severely hypertensive patient with an episode of TIA. Why should we be giving him immediately anticoagulants? If the blood pressure is so high, then definitely you can go slow on anticoagulants. You can start the blood thinners in an antiplatelet, aspirin and clopidogrel. That is what a neurologist usually decides. But once you have controlled the blood pressure, you can shift the patient on oral anticoagulants.
Good. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is dabigatran a preferred oral anticoagulant in this setting for preventing?
Actually, I'll tell you one thing. Yeah, the neurologist drug of choice is dabigatran. The electrophysiologist drug of choice is apixaban.
Okay.
I don't know why it has been established, but I don't know. That is what is happening. I have seen most of the neurologists are very comfortable with dabigatran. While I don't know, I have seen most of the cardiologists, we are more comfortable with apixaban.
Okay.
Rivaroxaban plus minus also.
Dr. Samir, Dr. Poddar, one of the patients, a young patient, immediately after recovering from COVID, developed TIA. He was on oral anticoagulant, novel anticoagulant. And then the neurologist stopped this novel anticoagulant and he started on aspirin. Is it logical? It was not in Delhi, somewhere else.
So very difficult to say, because as such there is no rationale for this decision. I think the only, if it was a TIA, it would have recovered and there is no reason that you will get anything on MRI. So why shifting the patient from NOAC to aspirin? It doesn't make any sense to me.
It could be money, sir, because they are very expensive novel oral anticoagulants.
No?
Financial reasons are always a problem in India.
Really, no problem. I checked with.
Then it's not a good switch. No? Should have continued on the oral
At
antibiotic.
least that makes it all a stronger reason to continue NOAC actually.
But on he developed TIA when he was on anticoagulant.
Might be because he was an anticoagulant, so he developed TIA. Otherwise, he would have developed a stroke, sir.
A proper stroke, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But fortunately, he all right. Now 3-4 months. So he all right.
Very difficult to say, sir. Very difficult to say.
Right.
Are there any more questions?
Dr. Anupama, I would like you to summarize this webinar for us. Very, very important webinar. And I would also like to inform all our friends on Physician Forum. Dr.
Yes, sir.
Primers, and before they are very close to us in PSRI. And no, not only he is a very good cardiologist, a very learned cardiologist, a great hand on PCS. He is a totally humble cardiologist and a thorough gentleman. So I would like all